Thanks, everybody. It's so nice that you're all taking time out of your day to come join me and hear a little bit about the world of book publishing. I wish I could be on campus to meet you all in person, but hopefully I'll get the chance to do that at some later time. And for those of you who aren't seniors, or even if you are, maybe they'll let you come back. I will be back as soon as I can to come meet you all in person. But until then, we'll do the best we can. So a little bit about myself, so you'll get a sense of who I am and why I'm qualified to even tell you about this. So my whole background is in the world of media. When I graduated from college a long, long time ago, I fell into the music business, interestingly enough. The first half of my career is in entertainment marketing. I worked for the Warner Music Group and was part of the launch team for the Vibe. I launched another company that was developing high definition technology. We put that on college campuses. And after half of my career in the world of entertainment marketing, decided to make a major career change and became a recruiter, and was a retained recruiter for many large packaged good companies like Coke, General Mills, General Motors, all the big agencies. And then was brought back into the Time Warner family where I had originally started my career. And I recruited for Time Inc., which back in the day had 135 magazines around the world. I recruited for all of them. And about 10 years ago, joined Simon & Schuster as their head of talent acquisition. So what my role involves is really hiring every single person in the company, from the executive level on down to those that are entry level. And I also run 3 internship programs a year and associates programs. I run the events committee. I sit on the board of the Diversity Council, amongst a number of other initiatives for learning and development. So I've had just about every job you can imagine in the world of media. I've seen all forms, but here's what I will say. Had I known then what I know now about the world of book publishing, I would have been in book publishing from the very beginning, because there is a real difference, and I've been in every form of media, so I can tell you, each form of media has wonderful elements to it, but the difference between book people and any other form of media is that really pure passion for the craft. And that's what separates them from everyone else. So they're really looking just to create that next Pulitzer winner, or that wonderful storybook that parents read to their children and then pass down, or that book that is thumbed, and read over and over and over and passed amongst friends and talked about all the time. It's really just a true love of their craft and storytelling. And so when you're surrounded by people who truly love what they do, you're happy. And that's a great thing, and something that people don't really think about when pursuing careers. But I wanted to talk to everyone about this because the world of book publishing isn't an industry that is widely spoken about. It really is this very hidden industry that's very small, that's for the most part primarily based in New York. And when people do come to the realization that it exists, which really is, quite an eye-opening experience for most people, they immediately think, well, I guess if I'm going to work in book publishing, I'll be an editor. And the reason I wanted to speak with everyone today is to tell you that we are quite a big industry with regard to opportunities. And we are made up of lots of other people besides editors. And there are many, many, many people and departments that have their hands on the book and really play a very important role in the creation of that book from the very point of acquisition. And so what I thought I would do with everyone today is talk to you about all the different career paths that are available as we follow along the track of how a book is made, right? So that probably is the best way to do it. So I tend to talk a bit quickly. So if I if I am talking too quickly and you want to slow me down, don't hesitate to holler. And as Jessica mentioned, if you have questions along the way, Jessica's going to help me monitor the chat. Feel free, you can interrupt me. It's perfectly fine. So let's start at the very beginning. So book publishing. There are many different aspects to it. And the aspect that I'm in right now is trade publishing. So Simon & Schuster is a trade publishing house. So what does that mean? So trade publishing are the kind of books that you would pick up for enjoyment. So it could be literary fiction, it could be commercial fiction, it could be a narrative nonfiction piece, a memoir, sci-fi, romance, thrillers, really things that you would pick up to read for enjoyment. That's trade publishing. But there are many other kinds of publishing. There are academic publishing houses. So that's certainly an interesting way to get into the world of book publishing. A lot of people get into that area if they have a specialty. Let's say they love biology. Perhaps someone thinks they want to be a doctor and then realizes that they hate the sight of blood. Well, that's okay. You can still, but you love to read at the same time. You can still focus on the sciences and get into the world of book publishing through academic publishing houses that specialize specifically in sciences or in law or in finance and accounting. So that's a whole industry in and of itself. There are also publishing houses that focus on industry journals or trade journals. There are independent publishing houses that focus on very specific, perhaps more like coffee table books and things like that. There are many aspects of it. And so it's important to realize at this point, what I wanted to tell you is that everyone in the industry, the one thing everyone has in common is that they stay genre specific. So because it's such a passion-driven industry, one of the first questions you ask yourself when thinking to explore a career in this industry, well, what kinds of books do I like, right? And that's what leads you down which direction, whether it be a trade publishing house or an academic publishing house, trade, what have you. Another option in publishing as you're starting out is on the agent side. So agents and scouts are the very first stop in the world of publishing. So that's where we'll start. So when someone writes a book or creates an outline for a manuscript, they have an idea, the first stop is always through an agent or a scout. The agents are looking for the manuscripts and the books. The agents also have specialties with regard to genres. And they're the first stop in the process. They are going through what we refer to as a slush pile, which is basically a pile of manuscripts. They have probably thousands of them. And they're looking for the manuscripts that catch their eye, that they think will sell, that they think they can then present to a publishing house. And so the agents do the first round. They meet with the author. They help them fine tune the book. They do the first round of edits to get it to a point where it can be presented. And so it's very interesting to be on the agent side of things because those are the people that are discovering the new authors, right? And they then, the agents, present to editors, right? That's how a book gets into the door. The first stop is always an agent, and the agent presents to the editors. They may present to multiple agents at once because ultimately they're looking to sell the book. How a book is ultimately acquired is through an auction. And who wins the auction isn't necessarily only about the money. It could also be about which editors are going to work on it, what the marketing campaign is going to be. So that's the first stop. So an agent is an interesting place to start your career because you then get to work with the author directly from the very beginning. You help form what that book will be, and you help the agent, you help your author through the entire process and help them develop and create other books as well. And an agent is a really nice place to start. Usually when there are jobs open at a publishing house, the publishing people will call their agents first to say, hey, who do you have working with you that might like to make a transition? So it's a nice opportunity to see the whole process and to see the acquisition side of the business. But now let's jump into the publishing house. So let's talk about editors first, because that's what everybody wants to know about. So editors tend to be a little more introverted than not. And when I say they are nose in the book 24/7, I am not exaggerating. Being an editor isn't necessarily a job, it's more like a lifestyle. It's more about who you are in your bones. What they really do is read constantly. So if you're looking for a job that is just a 9-to-5 job, this is not it, because you don't work on one book at a time as an editor. You could be looking at hundreds of books at a time. You're constantly reviewing manuscripts that are being sent to you by agents, and you're constantly working on a number of books that have a long calendar of when they're going to be released. So you're working on many books at the same time, and in order to read them all, plus do the rest of what an editor does, is not possible to do it in just a 9-to-5 day. So editors do work and read all the time. It's just the nature of their job. But they're not only about the reading. So what happens is when you're an editor, you certainly are working on editing the manuscripts, certainly working directly with the author and the agent on the actual editing. But at the same time, you have to have a little bit of a business acumen, because in order to acquire the book, you have to make a pitch to a whole team. And we'll talk about next who's in the room when you make that pitch. But you have to be able to convince the rest of the company that this book you want to acquire is going to be a big hit and is going to make money. So to do that, you have to have an understanding of many different aspects of the process and how it works, and the marketplace to know and to say, yes, I want to buy this book for $500,000 and it's going to sell, and this is why. So you have to be able to sort of make that pitch. And so a lot of editorial people need a little help down the road in their public speaking and their presentation skills, because they don't realize that you have to be able to do that as well and convince everyone that the book you're looking to acquire is going to be fantastic. So when an editor acquires a book, when they find something they love and they want to acquire, there is an editorial board meeting, and there are many departments in that meeting. So, and this is important to note, because everyone thinks when they're first looking at this industry that in order to have your hands on the book, to work with the authors, to really help in the creation of the book, you have to be an editor, and it's not true. There are many people in that room that will have their hands on the creation of this book at a certain point. So the first thing I will say, one of the groups that's in that room is a group called Managing Editorial. So the Managing Editorial people are a very interesting department, and they are usually the first person the author thanks in the acknowledgement of a book. Why? Because the Managing Editorial people are the hub of the wheel. This group of people knows how to make things happen no matter what crisis comes their way. Usually when I look to hire people in managing ed, the head of the department will say, just find me someone who's worked at Denny's, because anyone who's had food service experience knows how to keep the ball rolling no matter what's happening. Managing Editorial will say in the meeting, okay, you're looking to acquire this book. When did you want that book to hit the shelves? And based on that, let's just say they wanted the book to come out Christmas time. Well, if that's the case, then the Managing Editorial are setting the schedule for what every single person in the company has to do in order to make that deadline. So they are logistics maniacs. And not only are they setting the schedule for everyone in the company, they are keeping everyone on task so that those deadlines are met. So they're saying, okay, to the author, this is how much time you have to finish the book. To the editorial people, this is how much time you have to finish all of the editorial drafts. But then they're also working with the cover designers and with the production people. They're working with the people who are buying the paper to determine what paper to buy. They're working out deals with the printing company and the distribution lines, they keep every single person on task so that that book gets on the shelf when it's supposed to. So you usually see the managing editorial people running all over the building with manuscripts in their arms or cover design work in their hands, making sure that everything is on task, being signed off on, and following the plan to a T. Like I said, logistics maniacs. So you can't be shy if you're in managing ed. You have to love to have your hands in a little bit of everything. And you can't be shy to be able to say, hey, I told you I needed this done by Friday, and it doesn't even look like we're remotely close. You have to make this happen. So that's an exciting side of the business. And I always like to talk about managing editorial. Who else is in the meeting when the book is acquired? Well, some of the people who have their first say in that acquisition process are the marketing and the publicity. So marketing and publicity is a really interesting side of the business to go into. And many people who say they want to be editors, interestingly enough, wind up in marketing and publicity later down the road because they don't realize how big a role the marketing and publicity people play and how much writing they do. So to back up for a quick second, editors for the most part don't write. That's a myth that they write. There are some exceptions to the rule, certainly there are, but for the most part, editors don't write, they edit. And if they are writers, they tend to find it very frustrating to be in an editorial role because they're working on everyone else's books 24/7, and there really isn't the time for their own writing. So if someone is a writer and there's a novel in them, or poetry, whatever the case may be, usually they're not happy on the editorial side, but they wind up in publicity. So the best writers in the company are the publicists. The publicists are the voice of the author. So they're writing all the flap copy, they're writing all the press pieces, they're out under normal circumstances, out on the road, taking the authors on tours, talking to the Today Show or 60 Minutes and talking to the bookstores and really building a very strong network of press people that can get the word out about these books. But the marketing and publicity people work very closely together. And in fact, in many publishing houses, Simon & Schuster included, marketing and publicity have sort of come together under one umbrella because you can't really do one without the other nowadays. The world of marketing and publicity has sort of molded together and in a very digital way. So the difference between the two, marketing and publicity, I would say that the marketing people make the plan. The plan in terms of if we're going to acquire this book, who is the audience? Who is the audience and how are we going to reach them? And then the publicity people come in play and say, okay, now that we have this plan, this is how we're going to roll it out. So it could be anything from going on tours, there are press pieces, there could be events, there could be book clubs, both digitally and not. There are verticals that are done digitally. There are all kinds of ways now to reach the readers, both directly and in larger settings. And the choices are and sometimes we cross over into other categories as we relaunch books. So for example, how do you determine who the audience is? Well, it's not just about, who the reader might be originally, but there's also tends to be many crossover audiences too. One example I like to give is from way back, but it's very relevant to many things that are coming up now, whereas a lot of books are being turned into content for whether it be film or TV or Netflix series, what have you. A great example I like to give is The Great Gatsby. Fitzgerald is Simon & Schuster, author from Scribner. So we often re-release books when movies come out, or whether sometimes we put a new cover. But if there's a movie being made, or a series being run on a particular book, like The Great Gatsby. When The Great Gatsby came out as a movie a number of years ago as a re-release with Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't know if anybody remembers that, it was an opportunity to really remarket the book to a whole new audience. Because for the first part, we went out to people who are marketing, obviously, to Fitzgerald's fans, but then we were also looking up to people who are just interested in the 1920s and things that happened in the 1920s. And now that we're in the 20s again, that's a whole new audience of people that might be excited. And then there were fans of Leonardo DiCaprio. And then there were fans of people who, vacation in certain areas. So there are all of these crossover audiences that we were able to create marketing plans for. And then we even changed the cover of the book. So in more of a movie title, it also picked up more audiences. So the opportunities to develop interesting marketing and publicity campaigns has really broadened. And now, with so much content being done digitally, we actually have our own studios in-house, and we film a lot of the digital content for all the digital marketing and publicity efforts in-house ourselves. And it could be interviews with authors, it could be book clubs, it could be a number of things. In fact, our CEO just launched something today on Facebook. I think he's calling it, he's using the world according to, I think it's the world according to Carp, because he's playing off of Garp from the book. So he's going to launch this series talking about 2 books each time. So, really interesting, certainly new and exciting marketing campaigns. And the marketing and publicity people are always phenomenal writers. They are reading all the books. They are working directly with the author. So, it's certainly an area to consider. And they're also extraordinarily creative and very much on the front line to determine who are these audiences and how we're going to reach them and how are we going to tell them how wonderful these books are. So that's an interesting area of the business to pursue, right? It's only the tip of the iceberg. So what happens then is also in that meeting, that acquisition meeting, are the contracts people. So I like to point out the contracts people because this is an interesting side of the business to pursue if you're interested in more the business side of publishing. So people in contracts are not lawyers. They are not people looking to go to law school. They are people who are interested in the business side. They are working directly with the authors and their agents to determine at the point of acquisition, well, what is it that we're looking to acquire? Is it just the book in its first run? Do we want to have the rights to rerun this book over the years? And if so, how long? Do we want the right to publish this book in other countries and in other languages? And if so, which ones? Do we want the right for audiobooks? What happens if the book is acquired for film? So and do we have the right to take that book and make maybe a children's book out of it? Do we have the right to take that concept and that content and repackage it? So all of these things come up in that initial meeting with the author and the editor and the agents, and the contracts people then pull it all together. It's a really interesting side of the business. And do they work with the legal team? Yes, but they're not lawyers. The legal team do different things. So contracts is a really interesting side of the business. What works very closely with the contracts people are people in a department called subsidiary rights and permissions. So in the world of subsidiary rights, once we know what the contracts people have negotiated, right, the subsidiary rights people jump in and then they make it all happen. So the subsidiary rights people, it's a fascinating side of the business, and it's where all the money is made. They'll say, okay, now that we know that we have the rights to all these countries, let's shop this book around. So the subsidiary rights people, under normal circumstances, travel the world to book fairs and book shows all over the world, talking about what books are coming out, both new books and backlist, books that have already been around that are probably maybe coming back. So they're shopping all of the books to all these different countries, seeing who wants to acquire these books, selling them to the other countries. Maybe we have to do translation, maybe we have to re-edit, maybe we have to have new covers. So they're selling it. They're also selling bits and pieces to academic journals, perhaps, or textbooks. Maybe they're selling bits and pieces to other news media, whether it be, the New Yorker magazine or any other digital content form. So they're the ones that are shopping all these books around. And even with backlist, for example, there's a new documentary coming out soon, a Hemingway documentary. Well, I'm sure that the subsidiary rights people are taking Hemingway's whole library and selling it to people to supplement, at the time that the documentary comes out, because that usually leads to people wanting to pick up the books. So that's a really fascinating side of the business. It's an area of the business you would go into if you were a voracious reader. Well, obviously everyone in the company is, but also someone who's a shrewd negotiator, right? Because that's what they are. They're not lawyers, but they are really phenomenal, editorially minded people who are really great advocates for the books and getting them in as many hands as they can. The subrights takes on a little bit of an interesting shift on the children's side. And I'm sure many of you remember when you were young, the Scholastic Book Fair used to come to your elementary school, right? So that's subsidiary rights in its finest on the children's side. So all those books that came with the Scholastic Book Fair that set up in the gym of your elementary school, those are not all Scholastic books. Those are books from every publishing house that are, and subsidiary rights, licenses out those books to be sold during those book fairs. And in those little take-home sheets where you can, check off the list also. And your teacher gives you this little sheet, you check off, and you can order books for the teachers, all that, subsidiary rights on the children's side. So, and I like to talk about them because no one thinks about that. But when people do stumble across subsidiary rights, they're usually quite fascinated with that side of the business. And also because it usually involves a lot of really wonderful international travel. Though not now, but it was. And I'm sure it will be again. Okay, so let's see, where were we? So, were there are questions building up, Jessica? From what
there are questions. There are a number about this major, what type of opportunities are there? So I was telling some students, maybe as you go through all the roles, some
those
of
kind of questions
will be answered.
We'll hold off on. Yeah.
So I think for now, I will definitely get to all your questions, but I think maybe it's best for me to ask some of the ones that have come in after you kind of show the picture.
Then we're going to keep going. Okay, back to the editorial board meeting. So who else is in the room? So we talked about the contracts people and the subrights people and marketing and publicity and managing ed. So those people really help with the launch of the book acquisition process. So now the book is acquired, right? The book is acquired, the schedule is set, the marketing people are determining who the audience is, the editor is working on their thing, doing their first, second rounds. And now that they finish their edit, the manuscript then heads off to production. So the world of production is huge in the world of book publishing and has many different facets. So production people are a little bit different than editorial people in that they don't acquire, there's that, but they do the final draft of the editing and set the book up for production and printing. So there are a couple of different types of production people. First of all, there are the group that do the final copy editing and copywriting and laying out the actual book. So the book gets edited one more time. People who are really masters at Chicago Manual of Style, amongst many other things. And then once the book has the final edit in place, another group of production people jump in to lay out the book, to determine what font are we using, what size font, is there a flourish on every page, is there a heading, what size is the paper and what kind of paper, and does the paper have those rough edges or is it smooth, where are we getting the paper from, does it need to be cut in a specific way, and once they're finished with that, then another group of production people come in and say, now we have to re-edit and have a whole new production team come in to lay out for ebooks. So there's the layout team for the hardcover. Then there's another team that comes in and re-edits for ebook development. And what I like to say about the ebook development production people are, they are editorially minded people who like to tinker. So they are well-versed and self-taught traditionally in InDesign and HTML and a number of different formats. They re-edit the book and lay it out for ebook development. And then there's another group of people that is working very closely with the art department for cover designs. And then they have to incorporate that. Sometimes they have to move headings. Sometimes then another production group comes in for translations. So we do translation work as well. And then once everything is all finalized, the last production piece comes into play, which actually puts the book in the format that the printer needs and works directly with the printer, wherever that printer may be, in the actual printing of the book. So we have an entire floor of production people. There are so many involved. And there is a difference between adult production and children's production. And obviously, there are things that come into play with regard to color and texture, but there's also a lot of safety requirements. Little children put books in their mouth. We have to make sure we're not poisoning little children. There are pop-up books, things are shiny and sparkly and fold outs. And so production is a little bit more complicated on the children's side, but they also go through the same format. So we do keep adult and children separate because their ways are a little bit different. But there are a huge floor of people that just do this. Production people, I will tell you, for the most part, are really creatures of habit. Production people, generally speaking, stay on one path through the duration of their career, and just sort of rise up into the ranks of production. So let's just talk briefly about art and design, because I mentioned them in coordination with production. So I don't know if we have any design people in the room, but all of the covers in the world of book publishing are designed in-house. And just like the editorial people are genre specific, so are the cover designers. And it makes sense because usually a designer has a very specific type of look and feel to their artwork. And the cover designers specialize in certain types of books because of it. So you can imagine that the person that is designing the licensed property books for Daniel Tiger or Snoopy or what have you are certainly not the same people that are doing Stephen King's thrillers. Just conceptually, their type of art is very different. And so there are departments for each of the imprint and they focus on those covers. Now, if people are interested in cover design, I will say that it's all about typography. Typography, typography, typography. That's what everyone looks for when we're hiring cover designers. And we look to see a portfolio first and foremost. So on someone's resume, they would want to have a link to the portfolio at the very top. That's what we would look at first before even looking at the resume. And what we want to see is obviously a lot of typography work. And if you haven't done actual book cover designs, you can create some of your own, just as an example. So the illustration work is always freelance. We don't have illustrators in the building. We don't do illustration work, but all the covers are designed internally. So they're in those production meetings as well. So, all right, now the book has made its way through production. It's laid out, it's on its way to the printer. The printing is done out of house. And then once the books are printed, managing it obviously is all on top of all of this. They go back into process and then make their way to our distribution facility. We own our own distribution facility, actually 2 of them, and we distribute not only for Simon & Schuster, but for many other publishing houses as well. And that's an interesting side of the business as well. So we have a whole department that handles distribution for the Simon & Schuster books, but we also have a client distribution service team that works with many other publishing houses that comes to Simon & Schuster, not only to get the books out to the stores or the individuals or wherever they're going, but also to help them with some of the final steps to get those books actually published. Maybe they need help on the production side. Maybe they need help in buying paper or in translations or whatever the case may be. So we have a team of people that does work as the link to all of the distribution clients and helping them get what they need from Simon & Schuster departments to get the books finished, printed, and distributed to where they need to go. Now, one area that I always like to talk about and spend some time on is sales, because no one thinks about sales as a job in the world of book publishing. They think, every time I say sales, someone says, well, you know, I don't really want to work in a bookstore. We're not a bookstore. Let's just be clear. Simon & Schuster is not a bookstore, but obviously we deal with bookstores. But the world of sales is so vast, and there are so many options, and it's such an exciting and lucrative side of the business to be on. So what sales is all, and sales is broken out into categories within the world of book publishing. There are some people that only deal with Amazon, and some people that only deal with Barnes & Noble. There's a department that just deals with the independent bookstores, and one only deals with the large box retailers like the Costco's and the Targets and what have you. Then there's a group of people that only deal with the little independent places and the specialty places like hotels and museums and airports. And then there's a group that is called specialty sales that creates custom programs. Like, you know, perhaps, you know, years ago, you would, you know, buy a box of Cheerios, there would be a book inside, or you would go to a certain movie, they would give it a book. Special promotions that can be customized for books or per client. So there's so many different options. And these salespeople are working not only with the new books that come out, but all of our backlists as well. And in the world of sales, it's all about account development and relationship building. They're building such strong ties with whatever their chain might be, developing really close relationships with those people to keep them abreast of what books are coming out. They go to shows and they're presenting the books. They're inviting groups to come to the office. There's a group that only deals with librarians, right? And they host librarian summits all the time to show the librarians what's being published and what they should be excited about and what kind of promotions could they put together to really promote this book and how many copies do they think they would need. It's a really interesting side of the business, very, very people-oriented, very account management and account development driven. And people tend to move around pretty quickly in the world of sales. It's a really exciting part of the business. So let's see. So now that's sales. So I think we covered now one more thing. Obviously, we're a big business. So there are lots of corporate functions that come into play that are critical for keeping the business afloat. Obviously, there are HR people, there are finance people, there are IT people, there are operations people. We have a whole crew of people now that have majors in supply chain management to watch the distribution of the books all over the world. We're a whole company. And so, maybe you're a finance major, but or maybe maybe you're really good in math and you're an accounting major, but you love to read. Well, that's okay, because we have finance people in the world of book publishing. The nice thing about being in a path or studying as a field of study, something that's very centralized, is that you can do that in any industry that interests you. So you can be an accountant in packaged goods, or in the travel industry, or in book publishing, or at a bank. Everyone has finance people, everyone has HR people, but the nice thing about those kind of general majors is that you can take them anywhere. And if you're going to take them anywhere, you may as well take an industry that's exciting. Right? So maybe we stop and answer a couple of questions, right?
So why don't I start from the beginning? Some you may have kind of answered, but let me just, so let's see, sorry. Right, so a student asked, a playwriting and screenwriting major, do people in playwriting and screenwriting BA are there possibilities in a career in publishing?
So, we don't see many people with screenwriting paths in book publishing. Like I said, there are people who write, certainly, novels. Certain people write on the academic side. Certain people write for journals. For the most part, I would say if you're looking at screenwriting, you usually find that outside of book publishing, because they're the people who take the content from the book publishers for the most part and then turn it into, another format. So you would probably see that separately. Could someone who wants to be a screenwriter work in publishing? Absolutely. I wouldn't suggest they be on the editorial side, but could they be in another aspect of the business? Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great. And then a similar question, a creative writing student asked about those coming from a creative writing background working in publishing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a lot of people with degrees in English and creative writing, but I also have a ton of psychology majors and anthropology. I mean, the majors really run the gamut. It doesn't really make a difference what your major is unless you want to be an accountant. Truthfully, everyone should major in something that they just find exciting, that they can be passionate about, and then the career path will find its way. The only thing I know of that you really need is, if you're going to be an accountant, you need an accounting degree.
That's great. And then I think, Amani, the question about coming from that poetry background, a student had asked, is pretty similar to what you just said for creative writing in general.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then some student really just asked about the experience needed when applying to the different opportunities.
So that's a big question, and I'm glad you asked. So if you're looking to be an editor, if in your bones you want to be an editor, the path is a little rocky. It's tricky because the competition is tremendous. It's a very small business. So if you're looking to be an editor, you certainly would want to have internship experience. One of the great things about being at the college you're at is that you're very close to the industry and can intern fall, spring, and summer, especially while they're all virtually, but even before that. So you definitely want to try to intern at either a publishing house or at an agent. If you haven't had that experience, we like to see those that work for the university's, perhaps newspaper or literary journal. If you're looking to get into publicity and marketing, if you have a blog, many people in book publishing started out in college having some sort of book blog. We'd love to see that. Some people submit writing samples. We love bookstore experience, love it. So that's something nice also to have on the resume. And then we just like to see work experience, and all experience counts. Working at the local coffee shop totally counts. It demonstrates amazing people skills and the ability to keep things going and the ability to keep things organized and a work-life balance in terms of school and working. All we like to see retail experience, once again, really strong people skills. All work experience is relevant. But, we don't want to see 3 pages of experience before you even graduate. So there's a way to sort of condense things. If you've had a ton of retail experience, you can sort of combine them all together and say, I've worked at a number of different retailers in this kind of a capacity. We certainly don't want to see 3 pages of camp counselor. We can condense that into sort of one spot, but all experience counts.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is from the same students, like 2-part. As someone with a degree in history, is it possible to enter a career in publishing with a passion for reviewing content by independent creators geared to fantasy and historical fiction? And then the student just adds, is working on edits and story in a manga with an overseas artist good experience for publishing?
Okay, so certainly if you're a history major, that's wonderful because Simon & Schuster's really core is nonfiction. So we're home to Walter Isaacson, David McCullough, Bob Woodward. So many of our books are really big historical nonfiction books. And to be able to work with these authors and read hundreds of these kind of books, you have to love it. So a history major is certainly something that would be extraordinarily important for those kind of books. If someone were interested in sci-fi fantasy, we look for clues. In every situation in the world of book publishing, a cover letter is really important. And in the cover letter, what you're going to talk about is why those kinds of books. And book people gush a little bit, so it's perfectly fine to gush. And you want to say why those kinds of books are so important to you and why you want to work on them. And in the world of sci-fi fantasy, believe me, we know the real ones versus the non-real. We know the real sci-fi fantasy persons in a second and a half. In fact, I will tell you, the senior person that I hired to do publicity for, for Saga Press, which is our sci-fi fantasy imprint. When I hired her, we were still in the office at the time. She came in, she had Game of Thrones tattooed up both arms, right? But that being said, the person that I hired to work on our baby books, the really early, the board books, when she came in, her shirt was the Hungry Hungry Caterpillar. Do you see what I'm trying to say to everybody? Like the books are the people in the world of book publishing. So you have to be able to explain why your passion is with those kinds of books. You can't only say, I read everything. Because everybody loves something.
Thanks, Joy. So the next question is, I'm currently majoring in arts management and I have a passion for reading. My favorite genre is young adult. Where should I start if I want to join the book publishing career?
Oh, great question. So everyone says they love YA. And even if they say they love literary fiction, then they'll whisper, but I really love YA. So everyone loves that, which is great. So, the young adult category is quite small. You may want to sort of broaden the horizons a little bit and incorporate middle grade into that as well. So middle grade and YA give you a little bit more breadth in terms of options, because and there's so much overlap in middle grade and YA anyway. Or if not middle grade, depending on what kind of YA, commercial fiction on the adult side and YA kind of overlap a little bit at some points. But YA is children's for the most part. So that's a focus on children's books. So, what we look for a lot, if you don't have the internship experience in YA, you'd want to be very specific. If not that, then we certainly would want to see activity in the digital community of those books, because those books and the audience is very active in social media. So we'd want to see that you were very active in those places, and also bookstore experience, and if you had a blog or just some sort of attachment in that area to clearly demonstrate that those books are really where you want to focus.
So there's a student who's a literature major and asking, do we need certain degrees to become an editor or a publicist?
Absolutely not. Any degree goes. In fact, the more unusual, the more interesting the conversation.
So the next question, which I'm curious to know about degrees, to know about marketing and what degrees you need for that. So I think maybe you just answer.
Yeah, anything. Any degree goes. Anything. It's really, I don't care what you're majoring in, and I don't care what classes you're taking, to be honest with you. A lot of people spend a lot of time talking on their resume and cover letter about the classes they're taking. To be honest with you, nobody cares. And I don't mean this to sound that nobody really cares what you're doing, but what we really care about is who you are. We're interested in you as a person and your passion and what you want to do and what you want to accomplish and the stories you want to tell. So that's where the focus should be, not on the class. We know what school you're at. We know what kind of education you're getting. You know you're in a good place. I know you have great career services people. I've been dealing with this school for a long, long time. So what I really want to know is, who are you and why publishing?
Thanks. So a student asking, I was wondering about how to get started in managing editorial. Your current internship listing doesn't include that sector of the company. So I was wondering where you would recommend to begin a career in managing editorial while still in college.
So I always have an intern in managing ed. I actually have two, one on the adult side and one on the children's side, every single time. So, and what happens is when I'm meeting people for internship opportunities, based on their interests is where I place them, but I always like to put people in managing and on adult and children, because you really get to see how the business comes together and how, it's like a puzzle, how it fits. So what we look for, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of, or even any book experience. What I look for in managing it is someone who is unbelievably organized, who's really interested in the business, who's really good at juggling a million things at once. Someone who, I like people who have worked while they're in school or who've played a sport while in school, someone who's really good at managing many things at the same time.
Thanks. The next question is there no way you can bring in your own artist to do the book cover as an author if a book you wrote, if you wrote a book and want to publish? Can authors bring in their own cover artist, or is it always in-house?
It's always done inside. Illustrators we bring in, many authors bring their own illustrators in, especially on the children's side, but the covers are done in-house.
That's good.
I mean, I would think that maybe if they would, I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, everything's designed in-house.
And then in art and design, does the designer read the manuscripts of the books first before they get the idea of what the cover they're designing?
Absolutely. Everyone's reading everything. I'm reading all the books. Because if I'm going to hire the people to work in those imprints, I have to really understand what kind of books they publish, right?
Okay, next question is, I was wondering how to get into publishing in general. I think you've covered a little bit of that, but is there an ideal entry point for the business as a whole? I know you've already been talking about internships. Mm-hmm. And is it job specific, or is there one kind of catch-all entry point?
There's not one catch-all entry point. There are many, many different ways in. So first of all, Simon & Schuster runs 3 internship programs a year. And I also run an associate's program as well for new grads. But all the publishing houses offer internship opportunities, and so do all the agents. So this is an industry that truly wants to teach you what we know, right? We want to expose you to everything that we've got to offer. So there are internship opportunities available all the time and throughout the year. So that's one good thing. Aside from that, if you don't have the internship opportunity, like I said, there are certain things we look for on resumes where you can certainly jump in without it in many categories. I would say though, at the editorial path, the internship is really necessary. And if you don't have an internship and you really want to be an editor after you graduate, I would suggest either there are a number of 6-week crash course programs that are offered and master's programs that are offered. Here's what I will tell you. If you really want to be in book publishing and you haven't had any internship experience and you don't know what to do, Simon & Schuster actually offers 4 scholarships, 4 fully funded scholarships. One at the NYU publishing program, it's a 6-week crash course. The Columbia Publishing course, we offer a full scholarship. The Denver Publishing Institute, we offer a full scholarship. And the PACE Masters in Publishing program, we offer a $20,000 scholarship. So those are all for after your undergrad. And they're all free rides. We offer them, they're in perpetuity in memory of our CEO, Carolyn Weedy, who passed away last year. So those are some opportunities. Many universities offer masters in book publishing. It's certainly something you can think of and to try. And if you're in a master's program, you usually take classes at night, then technically you're still a student and you'll have more time to intern. So there's that, right? But many of these areas you don't need internship experience. And like I said, what we're looking for in the cover letter is really what your passion is.
So the next question is more about, I think, publishing themselves. So for psychology students who want to publish a book in the future, what is the best way to start? Or, just
to publish a book, you have to get an agent first. So what I would suggest, how do you find an agent is usually the next question. So I would suggest sort of just browsing through some of the books that are maybe similar in category to the kind of book you yourself want to publish, because agents are pretty genre specific. And you'll be able to sort of see a trend in the types of agents that specialize in certain kinds of books. But really the only way in is through an agent for legal reasons.
And then the next question is, somebody was just saying, please let me know if an internship in managing editorial or marketing opens up. I would love to speak to you more about these opportunities.
Always, fall, spring, and summer.
So will that be, this is me asking, are those is it clearly posted the different types of internships, or is it more of a general internship?
It's a general, right. But that's what you would say in your cover letter.
So that's good to know for everyone too, that you're kind of looking at general internship.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked, at Simon & Schuster, how many books do you publish a month or year?
Oh my gosh. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I mean, it's thousands a year. Yeah.
And then somebody's asking if there is an email to contact you to speak about internship opportunities or to just share my resume and cover letter for future references.
Yes, by all means. You can follow up with Jessica if you want my information.
So please feel free to email me.
Yeah.
And then I have one more question coming in, but I know you'll have some more to say, but I will just add that when, we're kind of done with the group Q&A, if you have a little bit of time, if anyone, I will keep this
definitely.
open if
if someone wants to just unmute themselves and ask a question, by all means, that too.
Yeah. And then the next question is, how has the pandemic impacted the industry?
Oh, that's a great question. So, before the pandemic, Simon & Schuster was not the kind of company where you could work virtually. Everyone was in the building. It's a very collaborative environment. There are lots of meetings. Everyone sort of needs to be together. And when this happens, I'll never forget, on March 12th, I went home for the day. And then at 10 o'clock that night, an email came out to say, don't come back. So the problem was that every single person at Simon & Schuster had a desktop computer. So you can imagine the problem. So first of all, no one had anything. I came home with just what I needed. I had nothing. I didn't take anything off my desk. I was just coming home for the night, planning to be back the next day. So no one had any of their things. So there was that. And no one could go back. So no one's been back since March 12th. So on everyone's desk, there's probably coffee cups, and it's really probably just horrible there right now. But what we had to do is first we had to buy everyone a laptop computer, right? So everyone got a laptop computer that was outfitted in all the Simon & Schuster systems. And then we had to figure out how to learn Zoom. And then we had to figure out how to hold all of these global, worldwide book fairs virtually. There was a huge learning curve for the book publishing industry. But here's what I will tell you a year later. A year later, not only have we mastered the art of all of this, but we've still maintained hiring. We have not had to lay off or furlough anybody, not a single person. We still move forward with our internships virtually. Everyone has really risen to the occasion to really make this happen. And what it's created was an opportunity for more people to get involved in more meetings and more projects, because it's very easy for everyone to just Zoom in. Whereas before, you had to, there's just only a certain amount of room in some conference rooms, right? So here we can offer things bigger, and it's given people the opportunity to create these forums for people to get involved. Our CEO now gives monthly town halls where everyone can join in and hear about what's going on in different aspects of the business. And so though it's been challenging, it's created a larger platform for us to engage with more people. And we've also learned that maybe it is a good thing to have some people based outside of the New York tri-state area, because when you do, you bring in voices from different areas who think differently, and maybe that's, in terms of book acquisition, that would be a good thing. So we have hired a number of very senior editorial people who are going to be permanently based in different areas of the country to be able to help us in that area. So a year later, the book business is thriving. We've done extraordinarily well. We've morphed, we've learned how to do this, but do we all miss being in the office desperately? Totally. And would we all go back tomorrow if we could? Totally.
And yeah, right now there aren't any other questions in the chat.
Okay. If anybody has any questions and wants to unmute themselves, I'm happy to answer questions.
Can I just ask one question, Joy?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you're kind of presenting on, or is it okay? I'm going to stop the recording now if we're kind of all in Q&A.
Yeah, let's just go with because usually there some real